All right, Joda, let's talk about influence. On this edition of the Sense and Signal podcast with Joda and Dan, where we make sense of leadership and sense making for you, the audience, and we invite you to participate in these conversations as well. So, Joda, let's talk about leadership and influence. When I say influence, what does that mean to you? What is influence?
I think influence is the person with the biggest zucchini in the world. That's what I think, Dan. I mean, if you have a zucchini this big, then you're going to be extraordinary. Have I shown you my zucchini?
You forgot to tend your garden is what happened.
That's true.
Yeah, that's what happened. It happened to me one year. I've
had this zucchini sitting around my house for now about a month. And I'm actually afraid to even open it or eat it. I don't know what to do. I almost think
I had one just like that because I forgot to tend my garden, Joda, and I ended up with a giant zucchini. I put it in a rocking chair.
Dan, your zucchini is not as big as my zucchini, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Enormous.
Yeah. No.
And I think a zucchini could provide influence. But yeah, in our age of internet influencers, leader influencers like Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Sam Bankman-Fried was an aspiring influencer, and then you have even Bill Gates is an influencer too. You have this trending conversation happening in the world around influence and leadership from the small scale organizational level. How does a leader influence people to ramping it up when your CEO is asked to make comments on world events to influence the outcome, or they're more like Elon Musk, where they're just getting on X, formerly Twitter, as everyone likes to remind us, and posting a tweet about something to influence people for their own political purposes. So we have this whole concept.
Dan, you asked me a question before we leave that point. You asked me a question, and I
you showed me your
zucchini. And there's truth to that. No, there's no truth to that. No, but I actually do want to take a pause. What is the elevator pitch? Because if I have a stick and I threaten to hit you with it,
that's a type of
otherwise
influence.
Do something. Is that influence?
Well, let's get to the etymology of the word influence, because I took some time to look it up, and it begins as an astrological term in the 14th century, meaning an emanation from the stars that acts upon one's character and destiny. And then there's also another reference that relates to the root of the word to the flow of water flowing in, and that's kind of medieval Latin definition. And I think this one is also useful to think about, and I think this comes from Thomas Aquinas. The capacity for producing effects by insensible or invisible means. So that, getting to a foundational level, those are some early definitions of what influence means. So,
I wonder what the difference between Thomas Aquinas' version of influence and manipulation would be.
Well, it gets me to thinking, because we talk a lot about influence, right? Like, especially in this age of social media where people want to be influencers. They're on YouTube like we are, or they're on Instagram or Twitter or X or Facebook posting their things, trying to influence people. And what I take away is there's a softness about influence and its roots, right? That kind of water flowing in and invisible, and the power of the stars to act upon one's character. There's this invisible quality to it. And it's almost as if by putting your voice out there incrementally, you're softly changing the world and people's beliefs and behaviors.
Yeah. And I wonder if interesting. And I wonder if the word trust is in there somewhere.
Oh, I think.
Or can you be influenced without the word trust?
So right? Story time. It's story time, Joda. So one time I was hired to do a research project for another institution. I went in, spent a year there, did focus groups and interviews, and looked at quantitative and qualitative data, produced this 100-page report, went out, presented it to the community. It was an hour-long presentation in front of 100 people. At the end, 2 people jumped up and said, who the hell are you? How dare you come to our campus and talk to us like this? Who hired you? What are your qualifications? Just kind of ripped me apart, And then I was like, whoa, because I'm on the stage in front of like 100 people. And then I had to go meet with those people in private afterwards. And of course, they were still screaming at me. I don't know if I affected any change. I think obviously I peeled off a scab that they didn't want to talk about, right? But I've had the same conversation at my home institution about similar things that has been not only welcomed, but not challenged. And it led to building a new program. So I'm going to ask you, what is the difference between those two situations?
Well, one is you effectively communicated your intentions to the audience, the other one you didn't.
Oh, that's interesting. Was I really speaking? So I think the audience is an important thing with influence, right? Knowing who your audience was. The other thing I think is trust, because that's what you had brought up earlier, right? That when I'm visiting another organization to do a presentation based on my research of their practices, they don't have a lot of trust in me as an outsider. I'm just some schmo who's hired by the upper administration that they already resent anyhow to challenge what they're doing in their work, And so, of course, they're going to lash out at me. Whereas if I'm at my home institution where I already have relationships built and people trust me, they're going to be a lot more receptive to whatever information I'm providing them, even if it's information they might not necessarily want to hear. So I think trust is a huge piece of influence. You can't influence without trust.
Yeah, man, I wish I need another day to think about this. I'm going to agree with that, and maybe there's
you could disagree with it. You could, in theory, disagree with that.
No, because I'm thinking like, can I be influenced by somebody who I don't trust? Can someone who I don't trust influence me?
Maybe with fear.
And to some degree, right, there is an influence, but I think that's a bastardization of the intention of the word influence as you're using it here.
Yeah, I would say
where you're saying there's an intentionality of I'm trying to get people to behave in a certain way, nefarious reasons or good reasons, whatever. And you're hoping that through, other than directly telling somebody to do something, they're going to start to do something through that influence.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting that, and I totally agree, really. I can't help but try to think of a counter argument. I think for people to do that, they're going to trust. It has to be a trust. There has to be
especially if it's going to be soft. If you're being directive and authoritarian, trust doesn't need to be there, right? Because you're just exercising power.
That's right.
But if you're really trying to softly influence change, like water, like the invisible powers of the stars, you gotta have
Dan, that's
trust.
how I think about you. As you were the invisible power stars. That's exactly right.
I got these twinkly lights behind me.
That's just totally how I think about you.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think trust is a huge part of it. And again, another thing you brought up from that anecdote I shared was knowing your audience. I think where I failed in the first one is two ways I failed in that first part of the story I told. I didn't build trust with the stakeholders I was presenting to. I was just an outsider. I definitely feel if I were to do that again, I would have built relationships with them earlier on so that it wasn't just this outsider coming in to do a presentation challenging some of their practices. Two, I really hadn't thought about my audience well enough, and these were quantitative faculty. They were statisticians and math faculty. Math faculty know numbers, so if you present them with data, they are going to question it, and that is kind of their mentality. That's just their way of thinking about the world, is to question the numbers and really analyze the method. So, of course, in a presentation that's going to be dealing with a lot of quant stuff, you've got to be prepared to talk about your methods and really respect that part of the audience who's going to challenge you.
Okay, so yes, I agree, you do. But trust gaining trust is a very enigmatic thing. We've established already that numbers don't convince people, right? That's a known thing.
Another huge one. Feelings convince people.
There's all sorts of things, and And I think when we say establish trust, what does that even really mean? And that's an art form. That is, I mean, I would suggest anybody who has a problem establishing trust, even when your intentions are good, go read books on it, because it's not easy. And some people have it naturally built that they know how to engage with people and,
well, I
and
think
get
one
that trust.
key thing is sitting down with people and actually just having real empathetic conversations.
Well, yeah, let me finish my thought here, though. But I mean, so yes, it is empathy. Empathy is absolutely one of the things. But there are a bunch of pieces to it that you can leverage. I mean, first off, this is the ugly one. This is the irony of the ugly one. Charisma, is a trust building mechanism.
Oh yeah,
when you walk into a room, do you have charisma? For whatever reason, that will gain.
Are you suggesting I don't have charisma, Joda? Is that what you're saying?
You are like
that I got yelled at because I don't have charisma?
I don't know. But you said empathy.
I am
but
like
then
the
also,
water.
But like you said, then can you establish your credibility?
Oh,
right? If I go
credibility.
in and that's another one. And how do you establish that and let them know that where you're coming from?
Credibility always matter? Because going back to something...
No, it doesn't. I'm giving some examples.
Yeah. I want to go back to something I think that's a gem that you said earlier, which is this whole idea of feeling versus rationality. And we go into these conversations thinking that everyone's going to be rational, even if they come from like a STEM field. But they're not. Whether they're going to admit it or not, we remember how people make us feel as that old, I think, Maya Angelou quote, not what they actually did or said. So people respond more. They're convinced by their feelings, and they're definitely, informed by their biases.
And that's the key. So here are some key things that I was reading about how to build trust, and which we will then say goes into you becoming an influencer. You really have to dig deep into human experience before you even get to the notion of influencing, where we're saying trust is a foundational chunk. And some of the key things for building trust is the ability for people to know that you have self-reflection. That was my issue with Donald Trump. I never felt that guy ever had a sense of self-reflection, so I just never trusted him. Well, let me finish. So, and then also admission of mistakes. Right, that shows people that
Trump was great at that. He always admitted his mistakes.
Right, exactly.
How dare you?
And then empowering the people around you, where you give them the adulations and say, "You take control of that."
And Trump was great at that too, man.
Right? Exactly.
He wasn't screaming at people in the Oval Office. He was adulating them. He was like,
No. There was nobody who felt on their heels in that room, I'm sure.
No.
So these were all the things that made me not appreciate him as a leader. And again, not to say him, but it is important that you show your authenticity of a character. That's a beginning point. And there's a bunch of other ways to do it, through collaboration, patience, servant leadership, networking. There's all other tools. But functionally speaking, I think one of the strongest ways is initially starting, if you know nothing else, being authentic and showing that you're fallible and you're willing to trust them as well. The catch is, if you do it too much, you might be perceived as weak. So how do you do that and still maintain a leadership perspective? There's a balance there. I don't know what that answer is, but that's the beginning of some level of trust by doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Actions. And I think building trust and doing all those things are definitely key to building influence. And I think also, again, everything comes down to relationships. If you want to influence people, and so the longer you've known people, the challenges that you've gone through together, the more you share. Like, I do think sharing about what's going on in your life, like, I shared with my staff that my mom was flying in for Thanksgiving and I hadn't seen her in a couple of years. And so when I went for my walking around management stuff this week, we could have conversations about that and talk about what everyone else is doing for their Thanksgiving. And, those little subtle things, those little details, and remembering those details about people are important for building those relationships. And then, you can draw on that social capital later when you need to influence people to do things and move them forward.
And I've got two quick anecdotes. One is just a note. So the company I currently work for, Fortra, they have monthly fireside chats, and we have leadership show up. those are some of the most, I've never experienced authentic, raw conversations from upper management before. And it goes a long way. I've just witnessed it, where you realize they're putting it on the line. They're letting you know who they are. And you almost want to defend them in a weird way. You know, you are on their side, and it doesn't feel manipulated by any stretch, because you feel like they're on your side too, because they're exhibiting the natural human realities, and you're seeing your leaderships be human. And it's a powerful God, I don't want to use the word tool. A powerful mechanism for connection.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have an anecdotal story, and I might have said this before. Years ago, I was in my youngin' days. I was when I was doing more like sort of graphic design work. Was working for Oracle, and I had a
Oracle.
Yes,
Oracle.
Yes.
I really have an issue with Oracle. We don't need to go into that in this episode.
A lot of people do. Today, especially.
The
but I had a great manager there, and one day I was doing some work where I was supposed to license some artwork, and we were always given a budget of about $150 to license some artwork. And I picked some artwork, and when they came back and said, okay, it's all ready to go, we got your images, and they're all, whatever. The artwork turned out to be $17,000, and we had already gotten a go on the artwork. Went all the way up to Larry Ellison. He said, yes, I like this artwork. And it's like, let's do this. I was a young person. I found out that the price on Friday, I had to live over the weekend. I was stressing out on it. Came back in, and I told my boss at first thing in the morning. Went to my boss and I said, Jane, this is what happened. And her response was, and
You're fired. You're fired. Right? That would have been my response.
Was exactly the opposite. She said, her response was, how much did he ask for it? And again, I said $17,000. She goes, that's way too much. They're nuts. Her what she did is she put it on them, not me. Again, she built trust with me by supporting me, by backing me up. Did she say I effed up? I effed up. She said, but you know what she said by that effort? She goes, oh, be careful next time. This is Oracle. They got lots of money. Let's move forward.
Yeah, and I think that kind
nothing
of grace,
petty. She could have been petty. She could have made me feel like crap. Never even came close to making me.
Oh, they don't put petty people in leadership positions, Joda. When has that ever happened?
Right, exactly.
What world are you living in?
Yeah.
No, I think that kind of response does build trust, right? And I think that's important. And so if she were to come back to you later on and say, hey, Joda, we need to do this thing, and it might be something that you're not fully on board with, you might be a little more inclined to take her lead on
Absolutely.
that.
100%. Yes. Yep. Because I knew that she was coming from a good place. And she wouldn't, you just knew it then. So you
and so that consistency of behavior too, letting people get to know you through your consistency of behavior and showing them grace. And I think, I just think this is important, especially in the age that we're moving into with AI. There was an article I read related to this saying that the future of leadership is going to be this type of influence, because we are going to, and we've talked about this on the podcast many times, we're going to have an age of more distributed leaders, distributed teams, as far as distance and within an organization. And the leaders of each of those little cells within an organization are going to be, you're going to have AI doing these tasks, these manual tasks for you, these repetitive tasks. So that's going to start to disappear from the workload, and you're going to have people doing different types of work, which will require leaders to be more relational and more influential than the top-down command and control type of leadership we might be familiar with from the first industrial revolution. And it's important to remember, some people think we're in the fourth
dimension.
Fourth industrial revolution with AI. It's bringing a fourth industrial revolution.
I want to ask you a question. Do you think you mentioned that you wanted to have this conversation because you've been noticing it's trending on some level?
Yeah,
and maybe it's because of recent stuff. It comes and goes. But in general, I feel like this notion of servant leadership and authentic leadership and influential leadership is increasing, right? The idea of totalitarian leadership in the workplace is falling to the wayside. Is that a function of the changing of the work environment, or is there something else that's happening? Could we have had this conversation in 1829 legitimately, or was that an environment that just wasn't suitable for a plethora of influential leadership in that way? Or have we just redefined things and it was always there?
I don't know. I think things ebb and flow when they change, and the society is definitely changing. I think the workplace is changing. Definitely the type how we do our work is changing. Maybe, I work in education. Our job is still to educate people, but how we do it has definitely changed. And I think generational values have changed. I think Generation X is much different than the baby boomer generation in terms of how we think about hierarchies and organizational structure. And I think that's even much more different for millennials and Gen Z. So I definitely think there's a generational change and expectation. So I think that's part of why we're maybe seeing some of this. I also think the technology and the changing work environments are also having an impact on it. But I think these tensions have always existed, right? I once taught the play Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare through a leadership lens, and we looked at it through a Machiavellian lens and then a Lao Tzu lens. Now, Machiavelli, definitely top down, do whatever you need to do, throw everyone under the bus type of leader. And you have that in Measure for Measure through the character of Angelo. And I'm not going to get into a whole summary of the play. But you have another character who's this prince who's running around, and not related to the prince from Michelangelo. I'm not Machiavelli, different Italian. And he was more like Lao Tzu, and embodies that philosophy, which is more of the invisible leadership philosophy. Like, how can I influence and make things happen with being behind the scenes and not front and center? And these are so it's a very old dichotomy that you're seeing there. So I don't think it's anything new under the sun. We're maybe seeing it in this historical moment emerge again for various different reasons.
Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a thing, though.
Yep. So
love to see where it goes.
Yeah, let's keep talking about influence, and I think there's opportunities for us to do future episodes on taking that. One piece I think is going to be very fascinating when thinking about influence leadership is that front and center versus invisible influence leadership, because one could argue that Elon Musk and this Sam Altman and Sam Bankman-Fried, when he wasn't in jail, they were trying to be front and center in the media, on social media, on traditional media type of influencers. Like, we are the center stage, versus an influencer who's more invisible and working behind the scenes to make things happen. And that could be a rich area of exploration too to think about.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
All right. Well, thank you for thinking about influencing and leadership with us on this micro edition of the Sense and Signal podcast. If you liked it, like the episode, actually hit that like button and subscribe and share with your friends and leave a comment about what you think about influence in the workplace and within organizations and in the broader culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, you are the influencing stars of my life. I just want to let you know that.
I am the water that's pouring into you.
Yeah, that's how.
And your zucchini.
So. And exactly. Oh, please, and let's not forget, this is the biggest influencer in the world. And so,
zucchini, man, I love it.
Zucchini.
He should be our mascot.
I don't know. I think I named
my zucchini Fred. It was Fred the zucchini.
I didn't name my zucchini, but
it makes it hard when you actually finally cut it up. Then you're like killing somebody.
I had so much zucchini that my friends avoided me. They didn't want me to give them any more zucchini. They would actually look the other way. Yeah, it was horrible. Like, I lost people because
get your zucchini away from me.
Guy. Yeah, I don't want to wear zucchini. So. Anyways, all right, people.
Take care.
Love you. See you next time.
See you next time.